Welcome to EoZTV. I'm Elder of Zion, and today my guest is Hen Mazzig, the pro-Israel speaker and writer. He's like a man about town. He's been all over the place, very famous. Very happy to have you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. The top thing that's in the news right now, and we'll get to a lot of other stuff later, but the thing that's in the news right now is Peter Beinart's articles in his far-left Jewish Currents, as well as in the New York Times, in which he's pretty much saying, Zionism, not so important anymore. I think we should have a one-state solution, which where the majority will rule, but there'll be a protected Jewish home. What do you think about this?
I mean, it's such a groundbreaking idea. We've never tried to live in any Arab country before. If only I knew anyone that we can speak to and just like consult about this issue. I'm cynical. Of course, it was tried before. I'm a living fact of how it's not going to work for us. And my family, as you know, came to Israel in the early 50s from Iraq and from Tunisia. They were refugees that were forced out of their land because they were Jews after decades of living as second-class citizens. And they came to, the 0.03% of the Middle East, the smallest country in this area. They came to Israel and they found a refuge. And for people like Peter Beinart, I read the article. I read it a few times because every time when I read it, I couldn't continue. It was so boring, and it was the same stuff that Peter Beinart always says. But the first time is that he's honest about who he is. He is an anti-Zionist. He doesn't believe in the right of the Jewish state to exist, and he's been playing around with it. And finally, he's admitting, and he's out of the closet.
Yeah, and that's for sure true, and it's. And what I find interesting, and I think his audience is America. His audience is in Israel, obviously. And just like J Street, which he was very involved with, was essentially meant to split the American Jewish community into being, supporting Israel or being against Israel. Here, he's now trying to split it even further until it's being not just not for Israel, but being actively against Israel.
Right. And he's not alone. If not now, a few of their activists and a few of the writers in Jewish Current have been writing about how it's, this is the moment, and Jews are waking up to be anti-Zionist. They're trying to make it a trend, but it just stays in their vacuum and their this echo chamber of radical people that are opposing the existence of half of the Jewish community in this area. And he's saying, and there was a follow-up interview where Beinart said, well, if Jews will die, it will be very unfortunate. So it's very easy. And just like the British, when they colonialize other places and their imperialist approach towards the Middle East was always, if something happened to the local community, that's fine. We don't care. And I feel that's where Peter Beinart is coming from, especially because he's not here. He doesn't care about what will happen to us. And he brings up ideas that are so irrelevant. And he keeps on going back to the Holocaust and saying how the Holocaust is the biggest fear that the Jewish community in Israel has. And unfortunately, it's not true, because the Holocaust is not the only fear that we have. The majority of the Jewish community in Israel, other than the fear of a genocide, we were expelled from the Middle East and North Africa, from Arab states, just like the Arab state that Peter Beinart is suggesting to create here. So we've tried it before. It failed over and over again. 10 communities were erased in less than 30 years from throughout the Middle East and North Africa because there were Jews. And the Mizrahi community is a living example. And I think that's why Peter Beinart and If Not Now and all those organizations really hate that I speak about the Mizrahi Jewish community, because we are the living evidence that this will fail.
And again, it's not only, clearly you look at the Arab countries and what happened to the Jews there, but you could look at what happened in Palestine right before 1948. Right. In the 30s and in the 40s, there were tons of terror attacks, tons of the times that Jews were slaughtered. I will sometimes go down and actually often I'll look at the old Palestine Post and read articles from there, and it's just like okay, this Jew got killed, this Jew got killed. It was like an everyday event. And this is the life that Beinart wants the Jews to go back to, and it's insane.
Right, and it's insane for us because we understand the consequences. But when you're so sheltered and so shielded in your Upper East Side fancy apartment, when everything is handed to you, when you didn't have to work hard for anything, I think that's. And I'm not just talking about Beinart. I'm talking about, if not now, I'm talking about all those people that are involved in this anti-Zionist trend. Usually, it's people that had it very easy, and that's their way to to show how brave they are and join this populist movement. There's nothing brave about being anti-Israel. Everyone are anti-Israel. The majority of people, like more people are anti-Israel than people are pro-Israel in their circles. So there's nothing brave about doing that. It's just an evidence of privilege and racism and I don't want. It's not self-loathing, but it's really they really have a problem with their own living their authentic life, and only when they will be true to who they are, they will be able to overcome it. But otherwise, it's very sad to see, very pathetic.
It is. I mean, and it's funny because they love talking about privilege, and they're the ones that have the privilege. They don't have to worry about the consequences of saying that what would happen to to 7 million Jews if they decided to run out this plan.
It's amazing. I remember I was in when was it, like 2010. I volunteered at a summer camp in New York, in upstate New York. And there was another counselor. Like, there was a program that IDF allowed you to go for a couple of months and come back, or a month and come back, and experience like to connect to American Jews. And there was one counselor in this camp, this girl that was from somewhere, White Plains or something, like some wealthy neighborhood in New York. And she told me how she's going to go to Harvard. Her parents are going to pay for it. Everything is going to be arranged. And I remember speaking to her, and I was like saying how I wish I could go to Harvard. I wish I had the money to do all this. And she was like, yeah, I'm not that happy about it. Anyway, long story short, I just recently I found out that she was one of the founders of If Not Now. And it's like, and they're attacking me constantly. It's like, and they're calling me privileged, and they're calling me all those names. And I'm thinking, like, it's, if they only had a mirror.
I know. I mean, it's funny because you may remember like a year or two ago, I came up with a intersectionality calculator. I'll bring it on the screen right now. In which I came up with a theory saying that here's a list of all of these different sorts of attributes you can have: trans, black, First Nations, woman, gay, Muslim, and there are scores next to them. And if you add up the scores, then you can tell who's right in any argument or any disagreement. It doesn't matter what the merits of the disagreement are. It just it depends who you are. However, because of you, and not only you, also like because of like Professor Jason Hill and other people, I've discovered I have to add another calculation to this. This is not quite as simple as I thought. In my calculations, if you are a Zionist, a proud Zionist, I just gave that as a score of negative, I think a negative 8 to add it. But it's wrong, because if you are a proud Zionist, then the people that have higher intersectional scores, like you and like Jason Hill, we have to go negative on whatever it is, because the more that you have, because you would fit in with you get the check marks of being Arab or other Middle Eastern and being gay, so that adds up to 11. You instantly become a negative 11. And he's an immigrant, he's black, he's also gay, so that adds up even more. So he ends up even more. In other words, the people that are the intersectional gods, the ones that create the scoring over here, are so much more angry at people like you than at people like me or something like that, because they think, how dare you? You should be one of us, and how dare you? You're like the worst.
Yeah, how dare you, a person of color, Middle Eastern man, not say what we want you to say, and how dare you, a gay person, not say what we want you to say? I mean, that's what, do you develop your own brain now? Are you like thinking for yourself? Like, that's not what we expect from minorities. That's how a lot of them are. And I'll just, but I think it's more about identity politics than intersectionality. Like, when I read about intersectionality and what it started with, it was really a good idea. It was trying to listen to other opinions and other backgrounds and people, and their understanding that people have different identities and backgrounds, and speaking about it. But what it turned into is identity politics, which I think that's what we're talking about, that is really bad. Like, if you can't list all of your layers of minority status, then you can't speak. But like, intersectionality was about bringing the word together and moving the word forward. So it's just very sad to see what it turned into.
And it is, and again, your point is obviously, again, just like before, the hypocrisy of people who are who are saying that they're really for minority groups, telling minorities and telling disadvantaged people and telling people that fit these categories what they should be thinking. It's insulting and it's racist, and they just don't even see that.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's hard to see it when you think that you're the only one that his opinion is right. When other people shouldn't have any other opinions. That's what they turn into.
Sure. Um, the Going back, and I was looking at some of the stuff in your history, and I thought it was interesting. You actually witnessed a terror attack when you were a child.
Yeah.
It was in. I looked up, because I saw you talk about it briefly, so I looked up the circumstance. It was in Petah Tikva in 2002, outside an ice cream shop. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah. Well, it was the heights of the second Intifada, and I remember my mom told me to be careful and to, if anyone speaks Arabic, to listen to what they say, to make sure that, if I hear something that is suspicious, to move away. If I see anyone with a coat, to stay away from them because it's summer and they shouldn't wear a coat. Really giving me a briefing to an FBI agent before sending me on a mission of getting an ice cream. But that was the reality that we lived in back then. And as I'm walking towards the place blows up. And I'm thrown back, and I can feel everything shaking. And I wasn't hurt. I ran back home. But in this terror attack, I know that a baby and her grandmother were eating ice cream, where a Palestinian suicide bomber walked inside and blew himself up and killed both of them. And it was just very traumatic.
Yeah, the name of the grandmother, by the way, was Ruth Peled, and the granddaughter was Sinai Kenan. And the people that took responsibility for this attack were the Fatah Al Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, which is and people always think that all these terror groups are only Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but this is Fatah. This is the group that is headed at the time by Yasser Arafat and now by Mahmoud Abbas.
Yeah, I mean, to think that when we're talking about the PLO, it's people tend to forget that this is where they started from, and it's they evolved during the years, and now they know how to speak better about or to to conduct themselves better. But it's still a murderous terrorist organization that almost took my life, and I wouldn't be here today if it was 10 minutes difference.
Yeah, and of course they still, even though they say that they don't support terror, obviously they're still paying terrorists. Obviously they still praise terrorists. Obviously their TV is still filled of praise for martyrs, and really, if you look at both Memory and Palestinian Media Watch, they're filled with like poems and songs and videos that are encouraging today's young people for martyrdom.
Right. That's the saddest part. That they're robbing Palestinian children of their future. They're really, it's the biggest crime, to raise kids to hate other people, and to think that to kill themselves would be the greatest honor you can do. So I'm more than anything, it's really painful to think of the child abuse that this organization is still responsible for.
And be almost, I mean, the child abuse is bad enough, but they've had, you know nearly 30 years now, like 27 years since Oslo, to teach their people to coexistence with Israel, saying, okay, we really want two states, we want side by side, we want to have peace. But that never happened in the schools, that never happened in their media. It's just as bad as it was ever. And nobody really seems to blame them for that. And again, this is part of the double standards that you see, in which the Palestinian side is not expected to act as rationally or as maturely as the Israeli side is.
Yeah, unfortunately, people don't care about when we speak about double standards and hypocrisy. I feel like people just they couldn't care less. We are the only ones that are upset about this hypocrisy, and it's true. I mean, we're seeing it, and we're seeing it in every area of life. From I have to fight with people online about LGBTQ rights in Israel, where they also say free Palestine, or when people tell me that they are against Israel because it's an ethno state, but then want to create a Palestine that will be what again? What, not an ethno state? What are they going to be? What type of Palestine do you want to create? A free democratic republic? I mean, it's just so bizarre, and I have to protect it. I have to defend Israel for not being racist. I mean, where does this idea came from? Even we are we are Middle Eastern people. We came from the Middle East. Some of us went all over the world for sure, but we are Middle Eastern people. We share the same genetics with these people. How can we be racist? And even though racism is a completely ludicrous idea, but even but all of those claims, like we just need to defend ourselves. Why they don't give anything about what's happening on the other side? They're talking about ethnic cleansing. They're talking about indigenous rights. And all these issues that they're really robbing us off of our history and the truth.
That's for sure. Again, speaking about racism, obviously, again, I'm coming from America, and right now the other big story is all the protests that are going on, the anti-racism protests, and on the other side there are riots as well. How does that play? What do you think about that? How do you think Israelis are looking at that?
Well, there were a few protests here in Tel Aviv supporting supporting the struggle for equality and the fight against racism. Racism is true; it exists in every society. It's actually very predominant in North Africa, in Arab countries. The term for black person in Arabic is also a term that is being used to refer to slaves. So it's I wish we could see more activism and dynamism on their part, but we aren't. But I know that in Israel it's something that we care about, and every time there were a couple of incidents of black Israelis, Ethiopian Israelis that were shot wrongly by police. And both incidents received such media coverage, and the policemen in both cases, I believe, were definitely fired, but also I think prosecuted. And because of those cases, now every policeman has to wear a camera on themselves in Israel, and that's something we're taking very seriously, and that's why we don't see it happening as often as we see it in other places. I'm very disheartened to see that Black rights groups, and specifically Black Lives Matter, has been very, I mean, they're not taking stand on any political issue. They haven't spoke about Hong Kong. They haven't spoke about China. They haven't spoke about Russia. They haven't spoke about the slave trade in Libya. They haven't spoke about anywhere in Europe where there's human rights violations. The only place that they decide to take a stand on in Israel. And I think it's really hurting their movement. It's not because it's not a one organization. There's no real leadership. Every chapter can say whatever they want. But I know that this has been the strategy of anti-Israel groups to really, to steal this movement and use them to attack Israel. And it's really harming the movement. I know Black people from my friends that are Black in the UK, and they saw that Black Lives Matter UK tweeted that they're, free Palestine and being anti-Israel. And they felt like it really hurt them, and they didn't feel like they can associate with the organization anymore. I think that for us, it's important for the Jewish community not to fall into the trap that those anti-Israel people are setting for us. And by the way, most of those anti-Israel people that are responsible for the Black Lives Matter being anti-Israel are not even Black. If you read the first time that Black Lives Matter in the US met, there were two activists that were white Jews, Jews, not non-Black Jews, that were involved in the writing of the Israel platform. And they were the one that added. One of them was working for Adala, anti-Israel organization, and both of them were really, pushing to add BDS into the platform of a Black rights movement that has nothing to do with Israel. So my point is that we need to be very careful, because I think the visuals that they are desperate to see, those anti-Israel and anti-Zionist activists, is that Jews are saying Black lives don't matter, and we can't fall for it, and we can't do it. And I see a lot of people from our community that are rightfully upset. There's no way that we should accept anti-Semitism in any way and any form, and we should fight it. But it's just like we need to be careful. And I don't know, maybe I don't have the answer for that, but I don't want to see that. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think that it's difficult to distinguish between being anti-racist and supporting the actual Black Lives Matter movement. I don't think there's a contradiction between saying Black Lives Matter and saying I support this movement, because the movement is problematic. But the sentiment, the phrase, there's nothing wrong with that, and of course we should all support it. It's like fairly axiomatic that that Black Lives Matter. But it's a problem, and and what's happening a little bit more recently in America, and again, this doesn't affect you so much, but we've been seeing since even before that, but there have been incidents of black anti-Semitism that have been coming up. Both the Farrakhan speech and the sports stars that have been saying things, and one that I posted this morning from a guy who's like a really famous television host, and as well as hip hop rapper and all these other things. But he's he's on his podcast. He's saying, oh, we're blacks are the real Jews, and the Jews are fakers, and then the white people without, because they don't have melatonin, are naturally savage. It's like, what, and they're allowed, and they're saying this sort of stuff, and it's like, come on, if you're anti-bigotry, you're anti-bigotry. It's no better to be anti-Semitic than being anti-black, and and there needs to be education. I don't think I agree that everybody should be fired or canceled for anything they say, but they need to be educated, and there's just such ignorance that's out there.
Right. I completely agree. I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism comes in every shape, form, and color of skin, and relating to one minority community does not make you immune to this disease, and that really affects every society. But people like Zach Banner that came out in condemning the other NFL player that was making, I can't even remember his name. That's how that was quoting Adolf Hitler, and the CNN host Don Lemon that was really pushing against. I think that seeing this, and this is the type of things that we need to promote, and we need to make sure that I think we need to be more vocal in our support for the Black community and fighting racism, because we are also subjected to the same hatred. It's rooted in it's the same roots, and I think white supremacists and KKK and neo-Nazis in Germany, they don't care if you're if you're Black or Jew, they're gonna hate you in both cases. And I think that if the Jewish community will show the Black community that we're there for them, and we have, for decades, we've been there, but I think there needs to be more. We need to be more vocal about it, because, like I'm seeing, Rashida Tlaib, before she became a congresswoman, she was protesting against police brutality and with the Black community, and it's no surprise that she's getting this support now, because, and I don't think Jews should go out and protest against the police. I don't think that's a thing that we can do, but we can we can tweet stuff, we can show up when there's protests that are not against the police, but for for equality. I don't know. I'm afraid of seeing us, left aside and being attacked by all those people that a lot of them are really anti-Semitic.
It is. The Don Lemon thing was. It was really interesting, because he's very anti-Israel, but it was a good interview in which he was just like pointing out to the guy that's like, come on, you don't realize how you're sounding and how you're being you're contradicting yourself. Unfortunately, and maybe you could talk about this. The impression I'm getting is that on both the left and the right, anti-Semitism has just turned into a political football. It's not like anybody really seems to care one way or the other, but they really care about accusing the other person of being anti-Semitic, and this is very disheartening.
Yeah, and that's a big problem. When both sides are accusing each other of anti-Semitism, and you see from both frictions of the far left and the far right that we're hearing the same type of rhetoric, and when David Duke and Linda Sarsour are saying the same things and supporting each other, that's a warning sign for us. And when people, it's not a warning sign because we know who both of those people are, but they have such support on both side of the extreme. I don't know if David Duke has such support, but definitely Linda Sarsour can arrange protests.
Yeah, and definitely, Louis Farrakhan obviously has support, and the left. He's not a leftist by any means, but the left is silent or almost silent about him. because they're afraid again. Oh, if we say anything negative, then we're going to lose our black support. And so as everybody's more concerned, again, it's all political. It's not there's not very few principled positions about anti-Semitism out there, and again, that's really really scary to me.
Yeah, but I do see a lot of Jews from both the left and the right that are saying to their own parties or their own social groups, saying to them, you have to call out anti-Semitism no matter where it comes from. I'm not talking about the radicals, the If Not Nows and Peter Barnett that justify anti-Semitism, or people even on the far right that will say, some white supremacists are okay and at least they're pro-Israel even though they hate Jews. So I think it's really important for us to have to be able to call out anti-Semitism on our camp.
Okay. There's a question from the audience. I think I know you already said the answer earlier, but maybe we'll switch the question around. He's from Al-Hazi Muhammad. He asks, I'd like to know Mazzig's position on a 1 or 2 state solution and which one of them he thinks would work. I think you've already pretty much answered that. You think a 2-state solution would work better, but let me ask you a bit more specifically. What do you think? I mean, you have come out against occupation, which caused you a bit of trouble among the right wing, I remember. And but what do you think about the idea of annexation? Because I've seen from the center left in Israel, I've seen both sides. I've seen people that are extremely against it, and I've seen people that are saying this is just Israel actually establishing borders, which is something that it needs to do anyway. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm against it because I'm against unilateral moves like we've done in Gaza, and that turn out really, blew up in our face quite literally. So that's why I'm against it, and I'm also against it because of how it's going to affect us with the Arab countries surrounding us. I really don't care what Americans think about it. It's like they can speak as much as they want about annexation, and it's great that they care, or British people. It's great, but it's not going to affect their life. It's going to affect our lives. So I'm just like I'm against it because it's a unilateral step, but I'm not like extremely against it or vocal. I mean, I'm not you don't see me tweeting every day about annexation because I just don't see it as in Oslo we agreed that the blocks of settlements would be attached to Israel. There's nothing new here. We don't. By the way, we don't even know the plan. We don't even know what was supposed to be annexed. And they're speaking about Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel. Well, sure, we know that Ma'ale Adumim and Ariel and the Palestinians know that this is going to be part of Israel. They don't have any expectation to receive it, even if they say so. Well, they can say that they have expectations to get Tel Aviv as well. But it's. It might be if we'll see the plan and we can actually look at it and see that the annexation is going to lead to creating a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, then I'll support it even. But yeah, I think the 2-state solution is the only way to move forward for us, and just because it's important for us to maintain the Jewish identity of this country and Jewish and democratic identity. That's what I care about.
Did you consider the Trump plan to be a way towards a 2-state solution? Or do you think that it was like just a joke?
I think it was a way for a 2-state solution. I'm not dismissing it because of the person that is behind it, or the person that I don't think Trump wrote it. I don't think he even understands what it means. The map is too complicated. But but I'm not dismissing it. I think there's a good possibility because it's based on everything that we already spoke about. We all know what it's going to look like. We all know what we want it to be. I know people are saying that we're losing the 2-state solution, and this is going to be, since I remember reading news in English, people have been saying that the 2-state solution is dying and the plan is dying and there's no hope. But they keep on saying it, and we keep on having hope, and I'm really hopeful.
I mean, practically, do you think like after Abbas is gone, there might be a more pragmatic Palestinian leadership?
Inshallah, yeah. Totally.
I'm not so sure if I'm that optimistic, but again, inshallah, sure.
Well, we say inshallah when we're not certain about something that's going to happen. So instead of saying yes, you just say inshallah. And then it's open, you just say God willing, who knows.
Just going back a little bit on your history, when you served in the Israeli army, you were part of Kogat, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And that's where I learned this, that Palestinians say inshallah when they don't really mean that something is going to happen. I used to meet with those sheikhs and leaders and then tell them, we have this whole plan of building this road. I just need your approval to move the families from here to there. And then just for a month, and they would say, yes, inshallah. And then the following day, like, nothing would happen. And I'll call them and I'll say, you promise it's going to happen? They said, no, we said, inshallah. And God didn't want it to happen. So and that's where I learned it.
Um, Again, and I'm sure you speak about this, but just to talk about it briefly here, you were in Hebron as well. You served there, and that's like the one flashpoint that the anti-Israel people love to point to and say how awful it is and how terribly the Israelis treat the people in Hebron. Once I visited Hebron, and what I saw was, the Israeli army had a dog there, and they were letting the Palestinian kids pet it. It didn't look like it was terrible, but again, obviously life wasn't great. Obviously, Shuhada Street, was cleared, and it was cleared for a reason. But what were your instructions when you were there? How were you supposed to treat the Palestinians when you were there?
Well, the whole existence of this unit in this place is to make sure that Palestinian human rights are being maintained and that that the human rights are being upheld, and we're working with. When I was serving there was the TIPH, the Temporary International Presence in Hebron. It was an organization of hundreds of observers that were covering, a few streets in Hebron, and they were going around with cameras and video cameras and shooting pictures whenever something happened and send me. I used to answer like 400 reports a month, and it could be the most ridiculous stuff that you can think of. An Israeli goat from the settlement in Hebron that walked into the Palestinian side and ate the grass of the Palestinians. And violating the Second Geneva Convention because it's stealing natural resources from an occupied territory. And that's a real report that I received, and I had to call the settlement and ask them to make sure that the goats don't go to the Palestinian side. But that was the level of the reports that I got. Sometimes there was bad things for sure. I mean, I had to make sure that soldiers are young, and sometimes they make mistakes, like every army. But unlike any other army, well, maybe I don't know, but very unique, as a lot of people pointed out, the IDF is known for taking care of problems that we have. I mean, Richard Camp said it, the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan. He said that the Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, and I think it's right, because we are not because we don't make mistakes. We make mistakes, but I think we're the most moral army in the world, because when a mistake happened, I'm sending a mail to the brigadier general and in the combat unit in Hebron, and they make sure that a soldier that misbehaved will go to prison. And there's investigations, and we make sure to really take care of the bad apples that we have. And I think that's the big difference. Though, yeah, there was issues in Hebron, of course, two communities that really don't like each other and have history of bloodshed living side by side. It's problematic. And that's why we're seeing the issues that we're seeing. But with Hebron being so covered with all those press and international organizations and hundreds of observers and UN, it's not like we're trying to hide anything. The only reason you hear news from Hebron is because there's so many reporters there, and everyone has to create a story.
Yeah, makes sense. Just to end this, the things are. I mean, you obviously, you come from, your entire existence is Middle East. That's what you are. That's your parentage. All comes from the Middle East. We see what look like really good signs of Israel's relations improving with Gulf states. Not so much with even the states that Israel already has peace with, which is weird. It doesn't look so much better with Egypt, with Jordan, but with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, with Oman, with even Bahrain, a little bit. We're seeing some really, really interesting signs that have been happening for the past year or two. What do you see happening in the future? Do you think that this could cause an actual real peace of happening? Are you optimistic? What do you think?
Well, first of all Jews are from the Middle East. We all came from here. Just making sure we're clear on that, because there's some confused rabbis online that might take it the wrong way, and then get told off by their senior rabbis. Anyway, to the question, yeah, I think there's hope for a Middle East, for a better Middle East, for better relationship. But there's things that even if you study Arabic and you learn how to speak the language and you study the history of this place, you will not. There's something about understanding the Middle Eastern spirit and how things are conducted, to understand the Middle East and know its language, but the language is not just Arabic. There's different language, and I think that by showing that it's a lot about honor. We know how the Middle East is, and Israel is now gaining more respect because we are standing for what we deserve, and we're standing for what's ours. And I think that's maybe a message to everyone, and for Jews all over the world that are watching us. And sometimes it's hard to be proud of when everyone are telling you that you should be ashamed, but other communities are looking at you, and minority communities are or other communities are going to support you when they see that you support your own community. Because if you can't support yourself and back your own community, why would anyone else stand with you? And I think that's where Israel is achieving now. We are achieving the respect of other countries, and that's where we're seeing them coming to us, and flights to Saudi Arabia, and new relations with countries we never thought we're going to be working with. But it's a lot about being proud of who you are, and just people need to just remember that if you're not going to respect yourself, no one is going to respect you. Why would they?
And then that's for sure. And I don't think that's a problem so much in Israel, but it is a problem with American Jewry, and that's exactly what, at least on my side, we have to be fighting, because there's too many people that don't have that self-respect, and therefore people lose respect for all of us because of that. So that's an extremely good message. Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for coming on the show, Hen. This was great.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Just a slight plug for your website. Is henmazzig.com, easy enough to remember. You do.
And the Tel Aviv Institute, the tlvi.org, that's where I work, and they are sponsoring me speaking here.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, tlvi.org. I would have queued that up as well. But thanks for coming, and again, well, hopefully we can do this again.
Definitely. I would love to. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. For now, I am Elder of Zion, and I will see everybody next time.
Bye.
Bye.